Okay, so we're doing something a little bit experimental. Okay, this is Thursday night, but this is not Thursday night Pirkei Avos shiur. This was inspired in part by the fact that whenever there's any holiday coming up, I really can't get my mind out of the holiday, which is good. And so I really have to teach something that's involved in it. But what this was really inspired by was let me share the screen. Judaism Demystified. So on this Sunday, I recorded an episode with a friend of mine who I had never met before, named Rabbi David Campbell, and we did an episode. We recorded an episode, which is going to be part of their series, Getting to Know the Rishonim. So we did it on Ralbag. And basically, the way the episode was set up is that Rabbi Campbell was the one who knew the Ralbag's philosophy, whereas I don't. But I'm very familiar with the Ralbag's Chumash commentary, so I kind of we did a little division of labor. And at the end of the episode, which is going to be aired on Wednesday, next week Wednesday, I said homework for the listeners is that the Ralbag has a list of 51. I made a mistake. I thought it was 50, but it's 51 lessons that we learned from Megilas Esther. And I said, if you want something to do on Megilas Esther from the Ralbag, then you should do that. And I'm sure I've been through them before because in my copy of the Ralbag, I have a bunch of them highlighted, but I've never gone through them in a shiur before. So I kind of wanted to do this experiment and go through the Ralbag's 51 lessons that he learns from the Megillah. This will definitely not be finished tonight. So the goal would be to do roughly half of them tonight and half of them tomorrow morning. Okay. And you can listen to them later. You don't have to be there. They're kind of standalone. But what might happen is I have no idea what this is going to look like. My only goal, I have two goals. I have a primary goal and a secondary goal. The secondary goal is to learn the individual ideas that the Ralbag gets out of the Megillah. The primary goal, though, is I want you to see how he learns lessons. Okay, and I think that you may have encountered either in a shiur of mine or in a Devar Torah or an article an individual lesson that the Ralbag learns, but I think seeing it on a whole sefer is a different experience. And I kind of want to talk about that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to review what these lessons are in abstract, what I mean by Ralbag lesson. And then we'll just go through it from the very beginning and learn through it. And what might happen is we might get caught up in individual ideas or want to go back to the psukim. So I'm not intent on necessarily finishing all these, but the broad plan is to go through these 51 lessons. And you'll have a lot to think about on the Megillah from that. Okay, so let me just review really quickly what the Ralbag's lessons are. Okay, so in the Ralbag's Introduction to Torah, which I gave a whole shiur on called Torah as Regimen, Ralbag's Approach to Chumash. I think that was in 2021. Yeah, Charlotte?
Sorry, it took too long to
Sure.
find.
That's good.
I have a quick favor to ask. Do you mind,
Yes.
in a few sentences, speaking a little bit about who Ralbag was? Because I don't know.
I don't mind speaking in a few sentences, but if you want to listen to the full
I
exposition on it,
definitely am.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
The Ralbag was lived in Provence in 1288 to 1344. Let's see if that's right. 1288 to 1344. Okay, good. Yeah. I just memorized that because I had to read up a lot about the Ralbag for this podcast. He was a Rishon, and he was I guess what you would call in some ways a polymath, which is a person who has a lot of expertise in a lot of different fields. And so he in Torah, he specialized in he's known for his philosophy, but he wrote commentaries on many of the books of Tanakh, and he was a mastermind in halacha, which is not well known. But it's evident from his Chumash commentary. He is also known for certain radical views. He was what you might call a hardcore rationalist. If you want to if you like labels like that. He was very Aristotelian in his views, and arrived at certain views that are not conventional. Some may consider heretical, but he followed his mind, and that is evident in his commentary. So that's the basics. Yep. All right. Yeah, I do thank you for asking me that because you're right. I shouldn't assume that everyone's going to listen to the podcast, even though it's going to be great. It was such a fun thing to record, and it's going to be very fun.
By the
Okay,
way, I know Benji and what's his name?
NC.
Benji.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, nice. All right, good. Yeah, they're great guys.
yeah.
Doing really good work. Okay, so the only thing I want to introduce you to here in his Chumash style, his Chumash commentary style, is his definition of Torah and his organization of his commentary. So his definition of the Torah can be found in his introduction to the Torah in the last sentence. Again, I gave a whole share on this, so I'm not going to dwell on it. He says that God's hashgacha to mankind that helps develop man to his fullest potential is Amnam hi mimenu benesinas zos haTorah ha'elokis, is by giving us this divine or this God-given Torah, asher hi nimus yagia hamisnahagim bo b'shlemus el hahatzlacha hamitis, which is a regimen that brings those who practice it perfectly or properly to true success. And in his commentary on Eov, he says true success is knowledge of God to the extent possible. Okay. It's a regimen. Okay. It's a system. Now, we give a lot of lip service to the fact that the Torah is a system that perfects us, but the Ralbag took this seriously to the point where he organized his whole commentary around it. And his commentary is built around the three parts of the Torah regimen. So I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to summarize it. The three parts of the Torah regimen are mitzvos, middos, and deos. Okay, mitzvos is what we would call halacha, which is what the Torah commands us to do or not do in physical or mental actions. Okay, middos, he has a whole theory. I give another shiur on this called Lo Sachmod, a case study in how the Torah commands emotions. The Ralbag's theory is that the Torah does not command us in middos in the same way that it commands us in actions, because in actions the Torah can regulate actions down to a minuscule level, but with middos, if the Torah said anger is bad, and here are all the parameters under which it is usher and mutter to get angry, or humility is good, and we're gonna legislate, the Torah is gonna legislate humility and say, oh, you have to be humble in this way and in this exact circumstance at this time. So basically, what would happen is the Torah could do that, but then people would violate those halachos all the time because it's very hard to control yourself to that level. And then people would basically give up on Torah and violate the rest of Torah. So what the Ralbag holds is that the Torah guides us in the development of middos by telling stories, through narratives about tzaddikim and rishaim, and mostly tzaddikim, but tzaddikim, the Torah will talk about, and we can learn from their actions and extrapolate ideas and also look up to them as role models and emulate them. And in the rishaim, the Torah will show us like what bad things they did and what bad things happened to them, and we'll avoid them. So it's guiding us in a way that is much more manageable than legislation. And then the third category is deos, which is loosely translated as ideas. It's truths in philosophy, metaphysics, and physics. Okay, so it could be scientific ideas, it could be ideas about God, it could be ideas about hashgacha, and those are the three parts of the Torah regimen. Everything in the Torah is there to perfect us in one of these three ways: mitzvos, middos, or deos. And then what the Ralbag does is at the end of every section in the Chumash, he has again, this is a whole shiur on this. He has these things called, where are they here? Let me find a good example. Actually, I'm going to go to Shemos because there are more mitzvos there. So let's go to the Seres of Dibros. No, let's not go to the Seres of Dibros. Let's go to, where's going to be a good thing? 12. So he has these things called, where are we? Toalos. Okay, and he'll organize it. He'll say that there is so toalos can be loosely translated as I like translate it as like a beneficial lesson or a useful lesson. Toalos just means like a benefit. So he'll list all of them. He says the toalos that come from Shemos chapter 12 are 32. Okay, most of these are mitzvos. Okay, so you got one in mitzvos, and then he breaks the mitzvos into all their parts. Maybe this was a bad example. Okay, in the previous chapter was 3 of them in deos. Here you have there are none here. Okay, maybe I should have chosen ahead. But you'll see when we do Megillah. But basically, what he does is he goes and after his main commentary, after his glossary commentary where he defines the terms, and then his walkthrough commentary where he walks you through his explanation of the psukim, he draws out all of the lessons that you can learn from the psukim in these three categories. Okay, and he's not claiming these are the only lessons. He's just claiming that these are lessons that you can get. Okay, so what we're gonna do, yeah, Charlotte.
Sorry, I have a feeling I'm going to ask a lot of
No, that's
questions.
fine. That's fine. I love talking
Apologize in
about Ralbag.
advance.
Yeah,
Okay. When you say lessons, do
yeah.
you mean deot according to him?
I mean lessons in mitzvos, lessons in middos, or lessons in deos.
Oh, okay.
And he will label them for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very, very handy. Yeah. And this is what attracted me to him because I was always taught that the Torah is is for our perfection, but like sometimes you're learning Chumash and you're like, how am I supposed to like apply this? And he says, here, I'll tell you how. 51 ways. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do Megilas Esther. And what I did, and again, this is an area where I'm experimenting. For the sake of time, I thought to read and translate all of this in English in Hebrew is going to be a lot. So I went through and I translated all of them in ChatGPT 4. Okay. And so this is not all accurate, but it's really accurate. Okay. I haven't read through all of them, but I'm going to read them. And if something sounds fishy, we'll go back and we'll read the Hebrew. And again, goal is just to read and see where this takes us. Okay. And you're going to see very quickly, like, the types of lessons that he learns are not the types of lessons that like you associate with Megillah necessarily. Some of them are, but some of them really aren't. Okay. So without further ado, let us go. The first benefit, okay, ChatGPT translates them as benefit. The first benefit is in character traits. It is appropriate to rejoice in goodness when it is found, as it is said in Koheles 7:14. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. That's Biom Tova Hiye B'tov. For this reason, the book of Esther recounts that when the king displayed the abundant riches of his kingdom and the honor of his majestic glory, he made this great feast for all his officials and servants and for all the people present in Shushan, the capital, from the greatest to the least for 7 days. Okay, now, when you read just to clarify here, the Ralbag does have an actual commentary on Megilas Esther, like a running commentary, like with Dibra Moskils and stuff, as you can see here. I am sharing, right? Yeah, I am. Okay. But so like if you really wanted in-depth insight, you would read his main commentary. So let's just read it to get a flavor of this. He says, I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I just want to read where he talks about the. Actually, no, it's too long. All right, I'm not gonna deviate from the plan. But what sometimes when you look at the lessons, what jumps out at you more is not what he says, but what he doesn't say, or like what the decisions are that he made about how to frame the lesson. So like, how do we typically think of Achashverosh's party, and what lesson is the Ralbag getting from it? Yeah, Lauren.
I feel like we usually think that it's like a hedonistic type party that he was
Yeah,
like showing everything off, not that it's something that you should emulate.
exactly, right? So like I was shocked when I read this because I was like, yeah, we think of it as like this drunken like feast and party that was like what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word for excessive when you like opulent? Opulent, there's a better word for it. But it's like an opulent party that like is not something we emulate. And what he's saying is no, like when you have good, you should enjoy it. Okay. It's like that's a very interesting idea. What it reminds me of is what my Rabbi Moskowitz always used to say, and I always forget where this let me see if I can find pleasure in Olam. No. Okay. There's this Yerushalmi that says that that God is going to hold you accountable for any permissible pleasure that you could have partaken of and you don't partake of. Okay, now obviously that statement is not meant to be taken literally because it doesn't just mean that you should like indulge in pleasure, but what it means is that God created a world that has goodness and pleasure in it, and if you have the ability to enjoy it and it's not going to be usher and it's not going to be detrimental, to your own development, then you should enjoy it. So it seems like he's attaching that lesson to Achashverosh. Now, this is part of why I wanted to go through all these toalos, because the question is he like saying that this is why Achashverosh threw the party? Or is he saying, when we look at Achashverosh, he might have been doing it for hedonistic reasons, but what can we get out of it? And I tend to think the second way. Like, I think Achashverosh was not interested in like Koheles, I think he was doing it for indulgence purposes of indulgence. But like when we look at Achashverosh, when we look at the Megillah and we're like, okay, what idea can I get out of this? then like I think the Ralbag saying you can get an idea that when you have, when God provides you with enjoyment, you should enjoy it, and that's something that is like I've talked about this a lot on the Soju podcast, but and I just heard on another podcast recently that there are no, I heard in the audiobook of 4,000 Weeks, which I'm rereading, that there are studies now being done on like how important it is to savor things, to savor pleasures. And my practice of savoring is wrapped up in my practice of gratitude, that I think the more you actually like consciously enjoy the good that you have been given, the more it promotes gratitude in someone who is striving to get the meat of gratitude. So even though Achashverosh wasn't having gratitude there, and Ralbag doesn't even highlight that, I think this could be harnessed for that purpose. Yeah, Charlotte.
My question is, he's not referring to the pleasure that you can that you can eventually seek. He's referring to the blessings that you already have in your life to
Sounds
seek.
like it. Yeah, it sounds like it because it sounds like he's saying Biyom Tova. Okay, so actually I'll read it. Roish lismoch b'himatzao. It is proper to rejoice in the good that you find, or good when it's found. And then it's the pasuk Biyom Tova Yevitov. On a day of goodness, then you should be in a state of good, or you should be in a state of enjoyment. Ulazeh sibir shebeharos hamelech rov osher kavon malchus of yikar tiferes gulaso asazeh hamishte hagadol lechol sarav avdav. So he was trying to spread the wealth and have everyone enjoy this prosperity that Shushan had. Yeah, Tamar?
I guess I'm wondering if you're going to learn a lesson like this, do you need a different methodology? Like
that's what I kind of want to try to find out when we read this.
Yeah.
I want to see if we're going to get a different methodology.
Like, I feel like this is taking someone who wasn't a good person, so you can't just automatically learn from their actions. Like if Yaakov does something, you could analyze it with the intention of finding the chachma in it.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, this person did it maybe for some reason, but instead of thinking of their reason and analyzing this character, we're gonna make up a good reason, kind of, and not make up. I mean, he found a reason why this would be good.
Right. Yeah, this is what I'm curious about because from my recollection, I went through before tonight. I went through about half of these because I feel like we're not going to get past half. And it's interesting that it's interesting what he chooses to highlight as bad middos and what he chooses to highlight as good. So I do think that the way you framed it, like, do we need a new methodology? That's a good way to frame this mission of like we're on the lookout for ideas, but also like what methodology is the Ralbag using here? Ayala.
So I was thinking about like the Rabbi Moskowitz idea of like or savoring pleasures or whatever, and if you don't, that's a sin, or whatever sin. And I feel like it's very easy to like slip into like overindulgence, especially today when there's like so many comforts. And I feel like it would be easy for someone to like justify why they should enjoy things more than like probably a lot of pleasures that they would enjoy would be harmful on like a psychological level. So I was wondering if it changes now that like in this time, this was like the king and his wealth, but I'm sure most people did not have the luxury. So like by him sharing this luxury with everyone else was like a really great thing. Right. But today, if everyone has so many luxuries and comforts at their fingertips, like, does that change things?
Okay, that's two great points. Point number one reminds me of the Rambam in the Shmona Prakim. So the Rambam has a theory of character development with what the Rambam calls deos, different than the Ralbag's deos, of two extremes. Every character trait has two extremes, and then there's the middle path that you should strive for. And you should always be like trying to adjust to like course correct to be on the middle path. But then he says in the Shmona Prakim, there are within each extreme, certain extremes are easier to fall into than others. So, and he seems to hold that that's true for all of them. So, for example, one of the examples he gives is he says it's easier to fall into the extreme of overindulgence than into the extreme of asceticism, or it's easier to fall into the extreme of spending too much rather than spending too little, or getting angry instead of being unfeeling, So he says you have to keep that in mind when you're course correcting of like, don't lean too heavily towards that extreme because you can get sucked into the vortex. Whereas going against the current and striving for the opposite extreme away from the one that has the greater gravitational pull might help you like stay closer to the middle. So I think that is a good word of warning. Second thing about the world that we live in now, where you can go like this and then like Amazon gives you what you want, or like you get DoorDash, or like you have running water and like soap. And the thing I always remember was I forgot, Ayala, if I showed this to you guys in high school, but when Yeonmi Park, who was the North Korean escaped from North Korea, and she was in South Korea and for the first time, and like she'd been raised in like this absolute horrific poverty. I think she went to the bathroom. I forgot where she was, and she had a piece of toilet paper with like a flower print on it, and she said like, I can't bear to like use this for that purpose, and so she kept the toilet paper because it was such a precious thing to like have like this beautiful piece of art, and like we just like waste toilet paper here and there, and so I do think that in a world where we are inundated with pleasures and luxuries, I do think that different standards are in order, and I think it's much easier to fall into this trap. And I think the way that I would apply this, I think your implied question also is like, or your question is like, how do we apply this practically? So here's what I'll say in a particular way for Jews, okay? I think what you should do is on Shabbos, you should consciously savor and enjoy your Shabbos food, okay? I think that's a great thing because that's something that is endorsed by Hashem, right? Is that there is a concept of Onik Shabbos, and Chazal promoted it by creating an additional requirement to eat 3 meals on Shabbos and to have like luxuriant foods. And so you're in line with halacha. And I don't think, unless you have a health problem, like if you have a health problem or an eating problem and you're just going to like be like pounding donuts every Shabbos, then maybe don't do this. But like, I think, most of us are in a situation where like, we're not going to get carried away in a way that's going to like endanger our health or our life or our perfection on Shabbos. So just remember, like on Shabbos, be like Achashverosh, but here, let's make it a better drasha. The king, Hashem, is making his goods available to his servants on Shabbos, right? He's commanding us in Onik Shabbos, and you should enjoy that. And it should be something that you consciously like make an effort to do. And again, connecting it to gratitude, I think is a good idea. Okay, see what we did also. This is another derech I found with the Ralbag's toalos in general. Is you take it and you just like the Ralbag is getting. He's pulling what he can get out of the Chumash or the text. We got to pull what we can get out of the Ralbag, even if it ends up being that the Ralbag is like not saying that what we're saying. We're following his lead and like finding ideas from this that are good. Okay, let's go to number 2. The second benefit is in character traits. By the way, the majority of these are in character traits. It is not appropriate at a feast for the invitees to eat in a manner that incites jealousy among them, but rather they should honor one another. For this reason, you will find it recounted that in the feast that the king made for all the people present in Shushan, from the least to the greatest, that the king indeed honored each one equally. Is this the right translation? That the invitees, she'en roy besuda shikru hanashim lechol mimeno shiatilu kina. Okay. I get the sense that what he means is the person who's organizing it shouldn't organize it in a way where jealousy will be promoted among people. Because you think the king invited everyone from the lowest to the greatest. The king honored each one equally. Therefore, he brought them all together in this place of utmost honor and greatness, where there was gold and silver couches for everyone, and they all drank from golden vessels, and the wine of the kingdom was served, and the arrangements for the feast were made according to the desire of every individual, both small and great. Now here, I do think that this is plausible, that this is what Achashverosh had in mind, because what would be an alternative party setup that Achashverosh could have done for his feast that would not have had this idea?
I guess he could have not invited everybody.
Right. Number one, he could have not invited everyone. Right. He could have just made it for the people who are at the upper crust of society. Right. But let's say he does invite everyone. What could he have done then that would be a different design?
Restrict who gets to eat and drink and enjoy what.
Basically, he could have made like a caste system or stratification within that, and that's how a lot of parties are set up. Like there's like first class on the airplanes even. So and you could have argued that, oh well, he's making it much better for those people, but he's saying that the net amount of enjoyment is going to be when everyone feels like they're treated equally and everyone has access to the same goods. Okay, so this is like a party planning technique, right? If you're planning a party, then you should make sure that it's not just that everyone's enjoying themselves, but that you're not arousing jealousy among people, And I feel like this is something that it's easy to overlook if you're not in the same framework as the people who you're doing this for. Like, I don't, I don't like work with like little kids, but I can imagine like when I'm teaching at Nija and I see like the preschool teachers or kindergarten teachers like with their little kids, it reminds me like, oh, little kids perceive things in a very different way than like adults, and I feel like it's very easy for little kids to get jealous of each other and for that to ruin the enjoyment. So like, that's just the first example that came to mind. But yeah, Lauren.
I'm just finding it really interesting that he's learning all these things from Achashverosh because, like, I guess it's not something that you think about when you're reading Megilas Esther to
Yeah.
like get ideas from what Achashverosh
I know
does. And I'm
that's
kind
part
of
of why I'm
like,
excited to show this. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm also just kind of curious, like, I guess not that it's not allowed, but like, I guess it's more about like, is this really? I guess it's like maybe it's representing what we learn, like learning the Izu Chacham maybe call Adam.
Yes,
Like
I was
even
thinking the
from
exact same thing. This is a real
okay.
model of what can we learn from Achashverosh, even if he was a bad guy. Yeah. Tamar?
Does he do this with like everyone in other places, like all different types of characters?
Yeah,
Does
in
he
fact,
Jewish?
so yeah, he does do this. And the thing, one of the things I tried to stress on my Ralbag podcast and on the Chumash here is the vast range of the types of ideas that he learns out from the different people. So for example, in the podcast, the structure of the podcast is after the introduction, then we go through the whole a.k.a, and I go through his learning the a.k.a and then the toalos from the a.k.a. So in the toalos on the a.k.a, sneak peek, there are ideas about like God's knowledge. There are ideas about Avram's perfection. And then one of the lessons he learns from the a.k.a is, it says by the a.k.a that Avram took with him 2 youths. Okay. And they went to Har Moriah. So what does the Ralbag learn from there? So he says, well, the Torah wouldn't tell us this for no reason. So what you learn from there is when you're going on a travel, when you're traveling on a journey, you should travel in a group of people because it's dangerous. So like, that's something that I feel like a lot of the other Mepharshim wouldn't pick up on, or they would like inject it with midrash and say like, oh, one of these youths was Yishmael, and like they would like go through that whole thing. So he's just looking for things we learn from the psukim. Doesn't matter who it is, and he'll give credit where credit is due, or where credit can be due. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So this is I think this is a fairly self-explanatory piece of advice. But I think if you take it together, right, then like, in other words, like this, he doesn't say don't instill jealousy among people because jealousy is bad in a Mishlaic way. He's saying that, I mean, I think if you take this with the previous one, that you're trying to provide enjoyment for the people, for your guests, then it's gonna it's gonna impinge on their enjoyment if they are made to feel unequal, and so you should make sure that they all get the best or at least equal. Yeah. Okay. Next, the third benefit relates to character traits. It aims to teach us that it is proper during a feast for the attendants to make an effort to ensure that none of the guests need to ask for anything they might require, as they might feel embarrassed to ask. This approach ensures that the favor granted by the host is truly appreciated by the guests. Therefore, it is mentioned that the drinking was according to the law. No one was compelled to alter their custom of desire, as everything was prepared in advance for them, including water for diluting the wine according to each one's custom. So he's referring there to the again, the proper way to learn the Ralbag is to learn the psukim and then to learn the toalos. But if you look at the psukim here, I mean, this is Shisia. This is pasuk 8. Vashisia kadas ein ones. The drinking was according to law. No one was forced. Yisad hamelach al kol rav beso lasos kirton ish va'ish. Because thus was the king had instituted over all the officers of his house to do according to each man's desire. So again, Ralbag's looking at that and he's like, okay, well, why did Mordechai and Esther feel the need to like highlight this? Who cares? So what do we learn from this? That you should not force people to partake of things at a at a party or at any sort of feast, because it's gonna and to the contrary, you should try to provide for their needs to make sure that they're not embarrassed to ask. So this is like a very empathetic way to approach party throwing. Yeah. And again, this is a big, I mean, I'm sure you've been in similar situations, but like when you're a guest in someone's house, especially when you're a house guest, like staying at someone's house, it is always a really nice, like I was at, when I go to Connecticut, I usually stay with my my principal. But there's one time that she couldn't have me, so I stayed at the home of one of or I guess three of my students. And one of the students had like written like handwritten notes like identifying everything in the guest room about like where like you could use the pens in the desk if you need it, and like here's a like stationery if you need it. And I was like, that's a really nice touch, like to like make sure that like that, because it's a thing when you're in someone else's house, like am I allowed to take this, or like what if I need this? And so it's just very, very nice to like have those needs anticipated. Airbnb is the same way. Like if you're in Airbnb and the guest the host like goes out of their way to like make sure what you can and can't use and like where everything is. It's just a very nice touch. Okay, this next one's going to be a shocker to you. Okay. All right, here we go. The fourth benefit is in character traits. It is appropriate in gatherings for women to be separate and men to be separate, because if they are mixed, it could lead to an increase in licentiousness, especially at a wine feast. This could prevent women from achieving their desires in terms of eating and drinking, as they might feel embarrassed in front of the men. For this reason, it is mentioned that Queen Vashti made a feast for the women so that men and women would be separate. Okay, so again, you look at Vashti, and you look at the way Chazal talk about Vashti in this pasuk here, that Gam Vashti hamalka asasa mishte nashim beis hamalchus asher lamelech Achashverosh. Also, Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house of King Achashverosh. So, anyone know what Chazal say about that? Like why she made a separate feast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, sure.
to purposely make her Jewish workers work on Shabbat because the
Right.
feast was on the seventh day.
Okay, yeah. So there is that Gemara that she was, let's see, I think it's here, that she was like enslaving, like stripping the Jewish girls naked and making them work on Shabbos. Hold on. But I think they also give a motive for why she made a separate party that was, hold on a second. I heard Rav Pesach refer to this in a shiur I was listening to today. Where is it? Okay, there's a thing. No, it must be earlier then. You'll see what I'm looking for, because there's a great Persian proverb, or I guess an Aramaic proverb. It says, oh, man, if I knew the Aramaic. Hold on a second. So, wait, Asasa Mishte. What was the phrase in the pasuk? Asasa Mishte Nashim. I'm just gonna look at Mishte Nashim. Mishte Nashim. Be a funny name for a sefer. Okay, we're in the Gemara. Yeah, here we go. Chazal say, Gam Vashti Malka Asa Mishte Nashim, Beis HaMalchus, Beis HaNashim Ibaile. So why does it say Beis Malchus? It should have said in the house of women. Amarava Shneim Ledavar Avera Niskavnu. So this teaches you that both of them wanted to do an Avera. Okay. Or wanted not an Avera. They wanted to do Avera. Okay. As the Hanyu Damrinchi, this is as the saying goes, Ihu Bakari Vitse Bibotzine. Okay. Which means this is just, I don't know why this proverb tickled me so much. He with big pumpkins and she with small pumpkins. Okay. Rashi says, what does that mean? He says, Kolomar, Deba'oso min atmo ze noef v'zo noefes. That with the same type of thing, the husband is involved in like licentious, promiscuous behavior, and the wife is also involved in that. He wanted to show off her beauty, and she wanted her beauty to be shown off. Okay, so Chazal like make this out to be this like an orgy, basically, like a feast of indulgence. Okay, and the Ralbag says no, keep separate seating, like at a Haredi wedding, and it's especially if it's a wine feast, because it could lead to inappropriate behavior, and women will be able to enjoy themselves more because they could pig out without like being embarrassed being in front of the men. And I thought of this. I thought of this Ralbag the first time I was teaching at an all-girls school on Hanukkah when they bought jelly donuts for the girls, and I was like, I have never seen girls like eat like boys, the boy, like I am used to boys like grabbing like food and like eating it, but I never seen girls do that before, and I guess that's what happens if they're like all, I look, you guys know better than I do, when there's not men around. I mean, so that's what he's saying here, so you have to testify whether that's true. But the point is that he's being dan l'kav zechus and saying that this was a positive thing, and Chazal make it a negative thing. Now, I know why Chazal make it a negative thing, because I gave a shiur on why Chazal vindicate tzaddikim and villainize Rishayim. Is Chazal's derech is to take all the bad guys in Tanakh and to ascribe additional sins to them in order to learn from, to learn ideas about how degrade, how bad Rishayim are. It is interesting that Ralbag is taking the exact opposite approach. Yeah. Okay, but this is more party planning advice, it is a, I made the joke about Haredi weddings, but I'm sure you've been to weddings as well. We have separate dancing, but there are, sometimes things can get a little, depending on who the guests are, things can get a little mixed, and then that could be, it's the joke, it could lead to mixed dancing. Sometimes it actually does lead to mixed dancing, so keeping this separate does avoid that. Okay. All right, now this next part you're gonna find offensive, maybe. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you right away. In let me do my book advertisement here. One of the best book. Hold on, I'm not. My screen is. Gonna unblur my screen temporarily. Okay, one of the best books on Ralbag is by Menachem Kellner. And it's called Torah in the Observatory, Gersonides, Maimonides, and Song of Songs. And basically what he does is he goes through the areas where the Ralbag and the Rambam disagree, and then he explains what their machlokes is. Unfortunately, the book is out of print and is extremely expensive on Amazon. But the last chapter is called, second to last chapter is called Misogyny, Gersonides versus Maimonides. And he basically makes a very convincing argument that both the Rambam and Ralbag believed that women were inferior, but the Rambam thought women were inferior for circumstantial reasons, that women just didn't get as good of an education. And the Rambam makes comments throughout his writings, or several comments throughout his writings, that women have the capacity to be equal to men in intelligence and in everything like that. And he heaps great praise on Miriam, for being one of the most perfected humans ever. But the Ralbag doesn't. And Kellner's conclusion, which again, it's pretty confusing, is that the Ralbag held that women were intrinsically inferior, okay? And the final paragraph of this chapter in the Ralbag, in Kellner, is he says, philosophically, Gersonides could have followed Maimonides and Averroes in his understanding of the nature of womankind. He did not, and we simply have no way of knowing why he disdained women so much. And you do get that impression from reading the Ralbag, is he just had this very, very low view of women, okay? And that's going to come across in what we read next, okay? So he says like this: the fifth benefit is in character traits. It is to inform us that it is appropriate for women to acquiesce to fulfilling the desires of their husbands, as they were created to fulfill the wishes of men, as explained in this section in Genesis. So he literally holds that the point of the creation narrative of and Ezer Kenegdo is he holds that women were created to serve men. Okay, and it's interesting. I don't know what was going on in Provence at the time, so I don't know if this is something that was held by other people, but that's what he holds. And he says that that's why he holds that women had to be created intellectually inferior, because if they were equal to men, it would be unjust to make them serve men. So he's concerned about justice, but he holds that women were created to serve men. For this reason, the story of what happened to Vashti is recounted because she did not submit to the command of her husband, Achashverosh. The ultimate difficulty in this matter, in the eyes of all the king's officials, was to publicize the issue that this is an obligation for all women. So again, unlike the standard narrative, we say Vashti didn't appear before Achashverosh because he wanted her to appear naked, or because he was, being disrespectful to her as the offspring of Nebuchadnezzar, or she had some sort of bad midah. He holds that no, the Megillah tells us this to show that she should have obeyed her husband. Okay, so not a very popular lesson to learn from this. Okay, next, sixth benefit is character traits is to inform. Yeah, Charlotte.
Sorry, maybe this is a stretch, but going back to the other one,
Yeah,
maybe it's a stretch, but I also read maybe by the Malbim,
yeah,
that she was also like, she didn't do the right thing by risking her life. Like the smart thing was just to go to the party. Like she
Yeah.
risked her life because of it.
right.
So maybe
Yeah.
that's what he's implying there.
Oh, that's what he's implying. I don't think that's what he's implying. I appreciate you trying to be Malam on him, and that is a good lesson to learn. But I don't think that's what he's saying.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you know what?
Sure. Yeah, Lauren.
Do you know what he how he interprets like when Hashem tells Abraham to listen to Sarah, or maybe that was just like an
Good question.
exception?
Bikola. Let's just check out really quickly what he says. The only place I recall seeing him give huge compliments is he does compliment Miriam a lot. He speaks very highly of her. Okay. Kol asher. Pasuk says, "V'yomer Elokim." This is in Bereshit 21:12. "V'yomer Elokim el Avraham al yara beinecha al hanar al masacha." Do not be troubled regarding the youth and regarding your maidservant. Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shema b'kola. Everything that Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. Ki v'yitzchak yikar lecha Zara, because through Yitzchak will your offspring be called. So the famous thing Rashi says, "Lamanu haya Avram tafel l'Sarah b'nevius." So you learned that Avram was secondary to Sarah in terms of prophecy. What does the Ralbag say? Okay, so first of all, he says, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah. Harazim said, Kol asher omer lecha Sarah. Everything that Sarah says to you. Okay, so that's a grammatical point. Then next he says, Ad shabahu dvar Hashem yis'ala shiyasu masha amar lo Sarah ki biyitzchak levado yikar lo Zara. So he doesn't talk about Sarah there. And yeah, so he doesn't comment on it. My guess is that it's not because of Sarah, it's because Sarah was right. In other words, that Yishmael was not destined to be the Zerah of Abraham. And so it's like, Sarah was advocating that position, maybe for her own reasons, maybe for the right reasons, and listen to her because she's right.
Right,
Okay.
right. Okay, thanks.
Sixth benefit is to inform every man is in middos, which is to inform every man and woman to distance themselves from the trait of gaiva, of pride. Surely one can see that what happened to Vashti because of her pride. She did not want to come before the king with those eunuchs he had sent to bring her before him, unless he sent many more distinguished officials than them. Okay, so now he's learning. This is our first lesson in bad midah. Okay, is that he holds that she didn't want to come because there was not a big enough entourage. Okay, and that led to her downfall. All right, that led to her being negligent in terms of failing in her duty to obey her husband, and that led to her downfall. Okay, so that is an interesting thing that just from a Mishlaic standpoint, like, presumably she knew that her husband had a temper, okay, and she knew that he was drunk, and she knew that he was summoning her in front of everyone, and it's going to really embarrass him if she doesn't come, yet her pride must have blinded her to the consequences that could come about for her if she upsets him in this way, if she insists on having like a proper entourage. Yeah, Charlotte. Oop, you're muted.
I'm a little confused with this. I don't see from the story like where the Ralbag would get that from the Pshat that she wants more distinguished people, even based off of what you were saying. Like I get the pride, but I don't get where she wants more people.
Okay, so I actually remember this from the Malbim, but let's see it in the Ralbag. I think it's because of the way it describes. It adds a phrase. It says like this: "V'tamayinu hamalka vashti lavo b'devar melech asher biyad hasarisim v'yiksof melech me'od v'chamas habaravo." Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's word conveyed by the eunuchs, and the king was very angry. It's actually B'dvar Melech. I mean, I think you could read this as not the word conveyed by the eunuchs, but she didn't refuse to. I think you have to read Biad HaSarisim is qualifying Lavo, that she did not want to come through the eunuchs. She wanted to come maybe through something else. Let's see if the Ralbag comments.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So he says on his commentary here, Amar ki afal pisha amrula ze b'shem hamelech elo hasarisim. Even though these eunuchs said it in the name of the king, shahaya roy shatamim b'divrem, and it was proper for her to believe their words, kihem mehamelech, because they're from the king. Im koze ma'ana lavo lamolos mitzvahs hamelech. She refused to fulfill the mitzvah of the king. The efshar she'i haratzon b'zeh ki lo ratasa lavo b'dvar hamelech mipnei heyos biad hasarisim. It's possible. So he even says, he's very intellectually honest when he thinks that when he's guessing, he says it's possible that the reason for this was because she didn't want to come at the word of the king because it was through the sarisim. Sarim rabim nechbadim me'ela. She wanted to be escorted by officers, not by these eunuchs. Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad you asked me about that, Charlotte, because it does show that this is what I was trying to do in that first toalos, that if you go to the commentary, you'll see where he gets it from in the commentary itself. But this is a trick, by the way, that I said on the podcast, which is that if you ever are looking for a Dvar Torah, go to the Parsha and just look at the toalos of the Ralbag and just read through them until you find something that you like. And then you could always go back and look in the commentary and see how where he gets it from. I actually may or may not have used that for tomorrow's article. But yeah. Okay. Onward. Yeah, Ayala.
I have a question about the toalos in general.
Yeah.
Is he saying that like these are what the Megillah is teaching? Like it was written with intent to teach these lessons, or like once it's there, these are things we can learn?
My understanding is the latter, because in the Ralbag's Tameh HaMitzvos, in his explanations for the reasons of mitzvos, he says like this. In his intro. Okay. He says, okay, no, this is too much to read here. Oh no, maybe I could pull out the one phrase. Hold on. Okay, so he says, so he's talking about giving the reasons, and he says you should not overlook the fact that it is impossible when giving reasons for things in the Torah. Okay, he's talking about mitzvahs, but I think this is general. It's not possible to give necessary reasons that necessitate the existence of these mitzvahs in a manner that is like necessitated. Okay, I'm translating really badly. As it is possible in the chachmos halimudios, in like logic and math. Nor is it possible to give reasons that are as certain as in nature. This is not possible in any way. The nature of the subject matter of Torah is not such that it is capable of this level of verification. Kvar birze, how philosoph b'sefer Hamidos. Aristotle already explained this in the Nicomachean Ethics. Basically, Aristotle says when you're looking for certainty in any subject, you have to treat it according to that subject. So the example he gives is he says, a carpenter and a geometer are both looking for 90-degree angles, but a geometer is looking for an exact 90 degrees, whereas a carpenter is looking for 90 degrees for his use in carpentry. So he says, so too, when you're looking for the reasons for mitzvos, you should treat them as like, you shouldn't demand absolute certainty that this is the reason for the mitzvah, because the Torah doesn't lend itself to that. We're just theorizing. So based on what he says for that, and based on what I've seen in the Ralbag's toalos, it seems like he's saying that that these are just like plausible lessons that you could learn from this, not guarantee that this is what Mordechai and Esther intended, and not guarantee that this is like the right answer. It's just like this is what we can get from it. Okay. Yeah, Charlotte.
If I can just comment on
Yeah.
that. I think I remember asking this question when I was in school, like getting like a few years back.
Yeah.
And I think I remember, if I'm not mistaken, my teacher saying that the books of Musar that are created, like meaning anything outside of the Tanakh,
Yeah.
were more geared towards like our midot,
Outside of the Tanakh or outside of the Torah?
outside of the Tanakh.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, maybe one could argue Mishlei and
So
Mishlei,
more geared towards our middos as opposed to what?
meaning Sifrei Musar were created for our midot.
Right.
What we take from the Tanakh is we find the lessons, we find the beauty in all of it, but its purpose was not that.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay,
No.
yeah, it's I mean, Ralbag, as I mentioned in the intro to this year, Ralbag does hold that the Torah and Tanakh by extension and Gemara is trying to help us in mitzvos, in middos, and in deos, all three of them, and that's by
Right,
design.
you did say that. You did say that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but I mean, there's other theories, but he's definitely operating on this theory. Okay,
Yeah.
the seventh benefit is in character traits, is to inform us that it is proper for a king to execute his decisions with proper counsel as much as possible, even in the midst of great anger. Okay, surely you can see that Achashverosh, despite his great wisdom concerning the matter of Vashti, okay, so again, he holds that he was acting properly with Vashti, okay, did not want to act without the right counsel from suitable advisors. It is also mentioned that his custom was to consult with those knowledgeable in law and judgment on all of his affairs, and he consulted them on this matter as well. These advisors were also knowledgeable in the times, so that they could align their advice as closely as possible with the appropriate celestial arrangements for what was asked of them, as their counsel was to be such that it could feasibly be brought into action. So Ralbag held by astrology. He not only did he hold by astrology, he wrote astrological treatises, and like it was a very, very like sought after expert. And instead of wise men knowledgeable in the time of the times for Israel, there were the Urim V'Tumim, which provided the most truthful revelation, as we've explained in our commentary on Torah. So what is he saying here? He's saying that you learn from Achashverosh that even when you're doing the right thing and you think you're doing the right thing, you should always consult a bunch of other people and get their advice. And you should also not just advice on like policy and procedure, but in this case, environmental factors, right? In terms of astrology, if you hold by astrology, then you hold that there are better and worse times for success, and you should consult them as well. So that's a lesson in middos we learned from Achashverosh. And I've even seen people who say that Achashverosh was a fool. They still praise him for the fact that he like consulted his advisors. Yeah, Charlotte.
I'm sorry. I said I was going to
No,
talk.
That's
Okay.
fine. No, this is a this here.
So I have a question. It's like a hashkafa question. It's
Yeah.
relating to what Ralbag said, but in general, I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Sure.
So how can someone who follows astrology as guidance of saying that certain times of the year or month or where I'm not familiar with the concept,
Yeah.
can say that that's a good time or a bad time? How is that not avodah zarah?
So the ones who held by astrology, so there's two questions. One question is there a reality to to astrology? And the second is it permissible? So
Right.
everyone holds that it's not permissible. Okay. So let's say like the Ramban, Ibn Ezra, Ralbag, they all held that astrology was real, but they held that it's not permissible. And the reason why it's not permissible is because it goes against reward and punishment. That we hold, and according to some, it goes against Bechira, but we hold that Hashem determines our fate determines our rewards and punishments and brachos and klalos based on our merits and based on our actions. So
Right.
So even if there is astrological reality, then it could be overridden by tefillah and tshuva and tzedakah and that stuff. So that's why even the Ramban, who holds that it's real, will say it's usher to rely on astrology. But Achashverosh was not Jewish, right? So he was not bound by
My
that.
question is about the Ralbag for promoting or saying that there is a bad. He's referring to Achashverosh?
Well, there's two things. Ralbag held that astrology is real, but like everyone, he held that it's usher to rely on. But he is praising Achashverosh for consulting the astrologers because it is something that non-Jews are allowed to rely on. And I don't know, there's a question also about I just was reading this in the Ritva that let me just find it. Oh, okay. Oh, I can look at my history. Okay, again, pro tip, if you're an Alatora user, you should create an account. It's free and you can log in and you can look for keep track of all your history. But my problem is I look up too many things, so it's not taking me it doesn't go that far back. Oopsies. What if I do? Okay. Fine. It's not gonna be all right. There's a Ritva that on a Gemara, there's Gemara Moed Katan that said, oh, you know what? Hold on. Did I highlight it? No, I didn't highlight it. There's Gemara and Moed Katan that says, I'm gonna find it because it's important to show you. Hold on.
Rabbi, it's okay. It's okay.
No. I want to find this in Moed Katan. It was Chaf something. It's either Chaf Aleph or Chaf Tes. And let's look at the Ritva. Boom. And the reason why I'm not searching is because I searched it and I spelled it wrong when I searched it, and like the spelling, there's something weird about the spelling. If I can't find it, oh no, that was not it. Oh, there we go, I found it. Chaf Ches. Okay, so okay, nope. Wait. Okay, here we go. Amar Rava in his Moed Katan 28a. Chaye b'nei umizone lo bizuchusa talia milsa ela b'mazla. Okay, so that's a tough statement. That your life, literally your life, your children, and your food, your sustenance are not dependent on merit, but they're dependent on mazel. They're dependent on constellations. Okay, so that seems to that's a lot, right? So the Ritva says, Pirush chas v'shalom she'yehei taleh b'mazel gamre. So God forbid that we should say that these things are dependent entirely on the stars. To Kaimalan ein mazel Yisrael. Okay, because we learned that there is no mazel for the Jews. Ubatla brachos uklalos Torah, and this would negate all the brachos and klalos of the Torah. Ki chay ubani umazoni klalim heim l'cholatos ha'olam. Those three statements are about all the goods of this world. Ela hakigamra. This is what it means to say that that it's not entirely dependent on your mazel. The mazel nami ika. There is a reality to mazel, but zechus can negate the mazel. Okay, so that's another thing that I don't know what the Ralbag held, but we do have this principle of ein mazel Yisrael, that there's no mazel for the Jews, and it could be that if the non-Jews are not under mazel and mazel is real, then Achashverosh then Achashverosh checking with his astrologers is no different than us checking the weatherman. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay. So we see the good middah of Achashverosh that he listened to advice and he sought advice. Okay. Toalos number 8. The 8th benefit is in character traits. It is to inform that when seeking advice from a group of great individuals, it is appropriate that the least among them should offer his advice first. And in this manner, they should proceed from the least to the greatest. This ensures that each one of them expresses his advice according to what seems right in his eyes. If they start with the greatest first, it could lead others to follow his advice due to his esteemed status among them, either out of respect or because they are afraid to disagree with him. This could result in the situation where the advice given is essentially from only one among them. For this reason, you will find it mentioned that the advisors were Karshna, Shesar, Admasah, Tarshish, Meres, Marsana, and Memuchan, with the least among them Memuchan, who was the first one to offer advice, and it was his advice that the king and princes agreed with. Okay, now where do we find this in halacha? There's actually a halacha.
In a Beit Din?
Yes. So I don't know if in any basin, but certainly in the Sanhedrin. Okay, in a Sanhedrin, then the lowest rank a member of the Sanhedrin would make their arguments first, because there's a fear that if the greatest chacham makes the arguments first, then people will be too intimidated or they won't want to speak against them. Okay, so this is another thing that you see from the Megillah. And again, look, what do Chazal say about Memuchan? Who was Memuchan?
That he was Haman?
That he was, yeah. Excuse me, that he was Haman, right? So I don't know if the Ralbag holds that, but like even if he held that, then like we don't see him being ashamed to learn a lesson that Mumuchan's advice was like Chazal look at this and they say he was Mumuchan. I think they say that he was let me just see if Rashi brings it down. Mumuchan. Yeah. Rashi says. No, Rashi doesn't say Mumuchan. What about the Torah Tamima? Mumuchan. Yeah. Zehaman. Lama Nikra Shema Mumuchan. Shemuchan Lepranios. That he was like ready for. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay, this is the one I wanted. Oh, where is it? Okay. What reason did they say that he leapt to give advice first? Okay, so then there's a pligi gimel amoraim. So 3 amoraim disagree. Chana amar al shahaisa mistaraso biminala shal alpanav shamar lo al hamelech levado avsa vashti amalka. Chana amar al shlo hizmina es ishto lesudas anashim. Shamar ki yasa dvar amalka al kol hanashim lahavzos baalehen. Okay, so I don't know what the first one means, but he says, why did Mumuchan leap to give advice first? So there's one reason. The second reason is because he was mad that his wife didn't get invited to the women's party. And then the third reason is because he had a daughter and he wanted to marry her off to the Malchus. Okay, so you see that Chazal, first of all, they say that he jumped to give advice first, and then they ascribe these bad reasons to him, But again, Ralbag is saying, let's look at this from without any preconceived notions and say, well, let's assume that the Megillah is teaching us this to teach us good middos. What would be good about this is that that it was organized that even though Mumuchan is last, because his name was written last, he was given the permission to speak first, so as to not bias his the views. Okay, ninth benefit is to inform of the. Okay, now this is the first time he's deviating from his classification scheme. Okay, so up until now, they've all been toalos and middos. This one, he doesn't call it toalos and deos because I think it's an event. He says, the ninth benefit is to inform us of the depth of the thoughts and strategies of the Almighty to bring about what will lead to the intended outcome. For this reason, you will find that because the efforts and plans of Haman against the Jews to destroy them were revealed to the Almighty, he orchestrated that this great feast be made, that Vashti be summoned before the king and not come. And as a result of this, her queenship was given to Esther to be a help to Israel in their time of distress. So this, he's pointing out the Hashgacha, basically. Okay, this is all part of the Hashgacha plan. Okay. By the way, shout out again. I so far I have not had to change anything. Shout out to ChatGPT 4 for this great translation. And again, I want to point out that it translated He Shin Yud as the Almighty, right? Which is not an exact translation, but it's pretty good. I mean, it knew that it was talking about Hashem, So like, it's an amazing thing that this is 22 pages, okay, of toalos, and I just copied and pasted them 2 or 3 at a time, and it took me less than half an hour to do this. And it's just amazing that yes, I could translate all of this, but it would be such a poor use of my time to do all this myself. And so just amazing ChatGPT there. Yeah, Lauren?
Just like a comment about this toilet, I guess it's kind of interesting that this, well, also just really interesting that Hashem sets this up because this is even before there was a Haman with a decree and also before the Jews did tshuva to merit being saved.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of interesting how Hashem sets it up before even knowing if they were worthy.
Yes,
I don't know.
that's true. And when you listen to the podcast, you're going to be even more astounded based on the Ralbag's radical views of God's omniscience. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that. That in other words, it's going to be more impressive that the Ralbag is making this point given his views about God's omniscience. Okay. By the way, I'm fine going until 9:20. I think would be good enough for me to stop. Okay. Hatoalas Asiri. The 10th benefit is to inform that Hashem caused it to happen, that from Achashverosh were sent out the decrees which were distributed throughout his kingdom, declaring that every man should be master in his own house and speak the language of his people. This was to ensure that the letters sent from him would not be taken seriously by the people upon seeing these initial decrees, which seem trivial because it is well known that every man is master in his own house. Obvious. This was a cause for the peoples to not regard highly Achashverosh's letters that were sent to destroy the Jews. If they had taken those letters seriously, they would have immediately sought to harm the Jews upon seeing that it was the king's will to annihilate them. So I've heard this point made. I don't know if Chazal say this. I think Chazal say this, that that this was also part of the Hashgacha, that basically, Memuchan and the advisors convinced Achashverosh to send out this ridiculous decree that it's a law that every man has to be the king in his castle, and all the people saw this. And who made the analogy? I hear this analogy. Maybe I heard from Jesse Fishbein that no, maybe it wasn't Jesse. That this is like Trump's tweets, Trump tweets a bunch of stuff that is not to be taken seriously, because he's clearly just running Twitter the way that Trump runs Twitter. And so when you see him say other stuff that in a vacuum you might have taken seriously, then you judge it in the context of all the other tweets. So same thing with Achashverosh. He sent out this really ridiculous tweet in anger, and now people are not going to take his letters as seriously when they say to kill the Jews. Okay, on to chapter 2. The 11th benefit informs us of the lineage of Mordechai and Esther, stating that they were from the tribe of Benjamin. This illustrates the fulfillment of Jacob's blessing to Benjamin, quote, in the morning he devours the prey, and at the evening he divides the spoil, which was manifested in the times of Shaul and in the times of Mordechai and Esther, as explained. So I have a feeling if you go to the Ralbag there, let's go to the Ralbag there, 49:27. You know what? I'm going to open up a new window because whenever I try to make the sources afterwards, I always forget what I quoted. So 49:27. Binyamin ze'ev yitraf baboker yochal ad v'la'erev yechalek shala. Benjamin is a ravening wolf. In the morning he eats his plundering, and in the evening he divides his spoils. So the Ralbag there says, I'm just going to read his toel. No. Okay, so he says, Ze'ev yitraf, rotem bo shebinyamin yihye kmo ze'ev sheyitraf, hine amar ze legvuras v'hatzlachaso. So he's going to be like a lion that tears its prey, and it says this due to his might and his success. The submission of his enemies will not be delayed. It's interesting. He's not. He says it's about Shaul, but he does not mention Mordechai and Esther. Interesting. All right, I thought he would. All right, maybe he changed his mind. He wrote his Megillah commentary after his Chumash commentary, by the way. Okay. Yeah. So this is telling us that this was the fulfillment of a nevuah. Okay. Which is also, again, shows God's plans from the very beginning. Okay, the 12th benefit is in character traits. It is to inform a person to show compassion towards their relatives and bring them close in times of need. Surely you can see that because Mordechai took in Esther, his cousin's daughter, and wait, is that right? Mordechai as Esther Bas Dodo, the daughter of his uncle, right? I don't think Dod can mean cousin. His uncle's daughter, right? Yeah. Oh, we found a mistake. And raised her, so because they were cousins, and raised her in his home. This was the cause for bringing salvation to Israel, because she grew up as his daughter and obeyed his command even after becoming queen. This aligned with the divine will to bring salvation to Israel through her. So I had never really thought about this before, but let's say Esther was not raised by Mordecai, okay, and Mordecai was a prominent Jew. If Mordecai goes and tells her stuff, especially to risk her life, she's not necessarily going to obey, right? But because she trusts him and he raised her, and he, she knows that he has her best interest in mind, then that's going to make her more willing to follow his advice, and that is what brought about divine salvation. Yeah, Charlotte.
Kind of related, but not. I always wondered, I feel like there wasn't enough written about how she was chosen? Like, is it superficial just because it was her beauty? Like, what was the selecting process?
Right.
How it
Yeah.
happened, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
right. It
And
does
how,
make it sound like it was just her beauty, right? But
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that is a good question. Also, I found out one of my students asked me how old Esther was at the time of these
same,
events. Yeah.
same.
What do you guys know or picture? Because I only found out an answer to this today.
I think like between 18 to like 23, like very
Okay.
young.
Yeah, that's what I picture also.
Yeah.
Anyone else? So obviously we don't know for sure, okay? But there's a midrash that has a three-way machlokas, okay? The three-way machlokas is she was either 40 or she was 75 or she was 80. Okay, now I don't think the midrash is taken literally because they base it off of drushos. So they say 40 because there's apparently a principle that is based on Rus HaMoaviyah, that there's a pasuk that refers to as a boss and says that you're not called a boss until you're 40, which is a weird midrash in its own right. Okay, then there's another one. The 75 and 81 has to do with the fact that there's a it's a drasha on Abraham when he was 75. So there's something with that. And there's something gematria with the name Hadassah. Okay. So I don't think it's meant to be taken literally, but what that, for those who take the midrash literally, I wonder what they hold. Like, not that an 80-year-old can't be beautiful, but I feel like it's not the type of beauty that Achashverosh is going to want to, like, in his harem, in the same way. Yeah, Isla?
I feel like I heard, I don't remember where, if it was quoting a medrash or something, that like he like kind of because she was keeping things secret, it
Yeah.
like attracted him.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. I also don't. In my mind, I think I heard that from like Rebbe or something like that, but it might be based on midrash or something. Yeah, yeah. That'd be an interesting topic to take up about what made her attractive to him. Yeah, Charlotte.
I actually just told I'm a middle school teacher, and I
Yeah.
just told my students that today. I
Oh,
said,
nice.
I think from the shot you can take what Ayala just
Yeah,
said.
like playing hard to get.
She played total hard to get
Yeah.
between come to a second party and I'm gonna tell you then who I
Right.
really am.
Yeah, the
Like
mystique.
very smart. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
She
but see,
played it
that's another
hard
thing.
quick.
Also, is like this ties back to the toalos. Mordechai is the one who told her not to tell, right? So it was his foresight. And I before I forget this point, we had the Mishnah earlier of mitzvah gureres mitzvah, that the Meiri says that it could be either and schar mitzvah that one mitzvah could lead to the other, either as through like hashgacha pratis, or as a natural reward, or as a good habit. And you see here, he's saying, Ralbag is saying that the salvation came to Israel because Mordechai did this kind act. That kind acts can lead to like goods that you couldn't even imagine. Yeah, Lauren.
Is it a medrash that Mordecai and Esther were married? Because I don't
Yes.
know why I've heard that
Yeah,
before.
it is a
Okay,
midrash,
sure.
and every year it bothers me, but it bothered me even more this year. The place they get it from is that Lakha Mordechai lo labas, that Mordechai took her as a daughter, and then Rashi says labas is Rabbeinu Pirshu labayis, that they read it as a household, which means as a wife. So first of all, it's not pshat, right? Second of all, even in the midrash, they have to like modify the word. So it's like clearly derech drush. Third, it makes it very hard to justify that she was a virgin, right? Fourth is it creates problems of now, like, we know that Achashverosh took her and slept with her. Isn't it like worse if she's a married woman? Like, worse for her and So I've never looked into that sugi before, but it's very disturbing that they interpret it that way. Like, I feel like there's just so many reasons to not take it that way. Yeah,
Yeah, that's why I always was confused by that. Why people just say that all the time
right.
without like as a fact,
So
and
this is
it's
a good
clearly not
reminder, by the
shot.
way, on All Torah. It's not as big for Megillah, but if you go to All Torah, oops, sorry. If you go to All Torah and then you click the menu, you go to Tanakh, you go to Unim, and then you click on. So the parsha topics are very manifold. The Nach topics, go to Esther, and then you'll find several of them. One of them is Oh, I thought they had one. Oh, no. I thought they had one on Esther's relationship with Mordecai, but I guess they didn't. I guess I was thinking about Esther's relations with Achashverosh. Okay, fine. Never mind. Okay. All right. Anyway, let's do one more maybe. The 13th benefit is to inform that there are sometimes signs and evidence from the beginnings of things to their ends. Surely you can see that Haggai saw something special in Esther over all the other virgins, which is why he placed her and her maids in the best place in the women's house, and ultimately she surpassed them all to the status of queenship. I don't know what he's alluding to here. Yeah, I'm not sure what he's alluding to here. I don't know if he's trying to say that Haggai had some sort of like foresight, like good intuition that like something special is going to happen with her. But either way, I don't really know what use that is for us. Let's do one more. 14th benefit is in character traits. Yeah, let's just do one more. Oh, this is an interesting one. It is to inform us about the ultimate humility of Esther, such that even upon seeing herself rising to the status of queenship, she submitted to Mordecai's command. And even after she became queen, when Mordecai sent her a very harsh message, she was not at all upset by it. This was the message he sent, telling her not to think she would escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, and you and your father's family will perish. This could be a testimony that humility elevates its possessor to authority, and pride diminishes its holder, removing their grandeur and authority. Therefore, the queenship was taken from Vashti due to her pride and given to Esther due to her humility and lowliness. So you see here also, like, I don't want to go so far as to say that he's using like a literary method, but he is pointing out like a Mishlaic opposites here, that Vashti, at her refusal to be to go with the eunuchs, that brought about her downfall in a way that was much worse than she could have than she anticipated. And with Esther, keeping her humility caused her to be elevated, to this high point. And I'm sure this is going to play out later on when she's like begging for her life from Achashverosh. And so that's a lesson about humility. And I don't think of Esther, when you say Esther, what are her good middos? I don't think about humility as one of her good middos. So this is like this is a good like point that he's making here, that that she did have to have a lot of humility to like, also to submit herself to even the degradation of this. Yeah, Charlotte.
Why do you think she doesn't have humility?
I didn't say that I think she doesn't have humility. I said I don't think of humility as the.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
So
right.
what do you think of when you think of Esther and then?
I think of chachma.
Okay.
I think of like the chief characteristic is chachma and planning, and everything that she does is calculated based on the consequences and based on the factors in her control and that are not in her control, and everything is through chachma. As the mishlei chachama is Esther to me.
I actually think I agree with you. I think she was very passive at one point until Mordecai.
Yes, right. And that's the interesting thing, is up until Mordecai tells her this harsh message, then she's passive. There's a great shiur by Rabbi Chait on that. I forgot what it's called, but I can maybe post it in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So I am excited to continue this tomorrow. And given our rate of progress, maybe we'll continue it next week also. I mean, we've got 50 of them, and if we don't finish it this year, we can finish it later on. But I mean, I hope you're finding this interesting, because it's a different way of learning Megillah, in my opinion. But yeah. Okay. So
is the class tomorrow?
Tomorrow it is at 11. Yeah.
Oh, I won't be able to make it.
Okay.
But...
So you can get the recording if you want, and yeah, whoever can make it can make it. If not, then have a good Shabbos. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye-bye.
Shabbos.
Thank you. Good job.
Thanks.